As a concluding remark to our brief journey into the weird world of quantum physics, allow me to open a little window, so to speak, on its possible metaphysical interpretations. To be honest, this is an intellectual minefield, since, as we have already noted, there are so many interpretations of quantum mechanics as there are physicists. And to take sides for one or the other interpretation will automatically put you in a position which may lead to endless disputes with no satisfying solution for either sides. Here you can see a list of all the plethora of interpretations of quantum mechanics that exist, just to make it clear how much confusion there is about this subject. And if you stretch your interpretation even beyond physics and tap into metaphysics, this will certainly make things even worse. That's why I prefer to keep our focus in this course on a technical level, furnishing first and foremost the facts, so that we have a clear understanding of what these facts are before jumping to conclusions or begin with wild speculations. However, having said that, I allow myself to dwell a bit now into some metaphysical parallels which represent my own interpretation and of course should not be taken as a final scientific theory or truth. My standpoint on the issue of the interpretations of quantum physics is that we will understand its strange properties and paradoxes only if we will open our understanding towards a higher and more comprehensive vision that goes beyond the materialist physicalist dogma. In particular, it might be interesting to get a glimpse of how the physical world appears to someone who has ascended higher states of consciousness. In fact, we might question if our philosophical and conceptual difficulty to understand the foundations of quantum physics might not have something to do with the fact that we look at the world only from a purely rational and analytical perspective, based on human sensory means and with reason the sole judge and rule for truth and reality, as physics and most sciences do. To clarify what I mean, just think of how does an ape understand the material world in comparison to a human being who is able to formalize its physical existence in terms of the language of physics, mathematics, chemistry, biology, and so on. This evolutionary leap enabled humans to ascend from an animal consciousness to a mind consciousness, and which led to a scientific understanding of the cosmos, with science itself even perfecting that mind consciousness and allowing us to translate this mind knowledge in all the practical technological applications that we know all too well. It would therefore be presumptuous, and by the way against the very principles of evolution, to believe that the human understanding of the world based on its analytical rational science and its sense-mind perception would be instead the last rung of the evolutionary ladder, with reason the ultimate tool of knowledge. Taking this into account, I found it inspiring to read Sri Aurobindo's works. Sri Aurobindo was an Indian mystic, yogi, poet, philosopher of the first half of the last century. And it is impossible to synthesize his teachings here, even not superficially. I recommend the interested student to resort to his writings. But let me select only some passages and parts of his works which might be relevant for us here. In describing his inner spiritual practices and experiences ascending to higher states of consciousness, higher than that of the analytic scientific mind, he reports about a higher state of knowledge, of gnosis, and that he called the supramental consciousness. This can be achieved as a result of tapasya, that is a spiritual effort. From that standpoint, he furnished us in his works, especially in the Life Divine and the Synthesis of Yoga, among other things, a description of what the universe is and appears to be from these higher states of consciousness. In line with the ancient Indian wisdom of the Veda, also for Sri Aurobindo, the universe is a manifestation, a self-expression and self-creative process of a supreme reality, the so-called Brahman. All is Brahman, the ultimate supracosmic reality, the one without a second, the only true existing, which is at once a static and immobile eternal reality, and yet dynamic. It is force of being throwing itself out in action, energy at work, as he used to say. Something which is universal, unity without duality, and yet made of parts, and that can be static and dynamic at the same time. This is, of course, a mere contradiction for our reasoning mind, but a natural state of being when experienced from higher states of consciousness. Between the individualized human mind and supermind, several planes exist, and that he called the higher mind, the illumined mind, the intuitive mind, the overmind, and finally the highest being the supermind. What is relevant for our purposes here is to note that the special character of mind is its cognitive activity of separation, division, fragmentation. Mind knows only by a principle of division, which binds infinitesimal points and associates them together in a bottom-up vision, but is unable to grasp the one and many as being just two sides of the manifestation of the same thing, which is neither one nor the many, but something that transcends both. In the words of Sri Aurobindo, supermind instead proceeds in its action from the unity to the multiplicity, and from multiplicity to unity, creating an ordered relation between them and an appearance, but not a binding reality of division. A subtle unseparating division, or rather a demarcation and determination within the indivisible. So there is something that is indivisible, and yet there is an activity in us which is a characteristic of the supermind to divide, but it is a sort of unseparating division, something that we cannot understand rationally, but it is something inherent in supermind. In fact, this sounds all very far from our everyday experience, or perhaps not, if we are able to take a little step inward towards an intuitive understanding of things. In fact, it is something not so entirely far-fetched if we recall the fundamental character of the quantum entanglement phenomenon. We have seen that particles can be in an entangled state, meaning that they form a unique and undifferentiated whole, where the two or more particles are in superposition states, and where any attempt to conceptualize this sort of quantum system, this entangled system, in terms as a sum of subunits, as something which is inconsistent and leads to contradictions. It looks like nature is telling us never to consider matter as made of single particles, but as the expression and manifestation of a single holistic unit. Quantum entanglement indeed seems to suggest us that the separation, division, fragmentation, and distinction is not something inherent to the ultimate material reality, but emerges as an illusion, a sort of epiphenomenon. In fact, this separation into distinguishable particles, remember what we said about quantum indistinguishability. This distinguishability in terms of particles comes into being only at the instant of interaction, with other particles or with a measurement device, or what we simply call measurement. But until then, the entangled particles are no particles at all. They are only a quantum system described by a wave function which extends itself throughout space and does not distinguish between one or another particle, and does not allow for the particle having a definite state until observed. However, fact is that once the wave function collapses, we are left with quite a fragmented universe, and it is hard to believe that there are no chunks of matter and particles. After all, it is just the reductionist bottom-up approach which was so successful in science, and it would be silly to dismiss it completely. But according to Sri Aurobindo, there is no contradiction. It is the nature of the action of cosmic mind the cause of atomic existence, and where an extreme fragmentation of the infinite was needed as a basis. Matter is substance of the one conscious being, phenomenally divided within itself by the action of a universal mind. Here what he means by the cosmic or universal mind is an emanation of the overmind. But while the overmind is aware and conscious of its divine nature and source, which the supramental is, the cosmic mind has somewhat lost this original contact and is the first step of a universal consciousness into ignorance. Overmind energy, he says, proceeds through an illimitable capacity of separation and combination of the powers and aspects of the integral and indivisible all-comprehending unity. Overmind is an organizer of many potentialities of existence. Whereas the distinctive character of the cosmic ignorance in which the cosmic mind finds itself is that it conceives and creates duality. It acts in terms of division, separation, and distinction, expressing itself in itself also in phenomenal division. But that's me now that I'm speaking. And this makes the difference to overmind, being forgetful of the indivisible, all-comprehending unity, because of a self-forgetfulness of the one in its play of division and multiplicity. Let us dwell into this further to clarify better. We saw how the supposed role of the observer in quantum mechanics is a misunderstanding. No conscious individual being is necessary to cause a wave function collapse, since this is a quantum phenomenon that already exists since the time of the Big Bang, much earlier than the existence of any physical conscious observer. However, due to its random character, which seems to imply a sort of free will, so to speak, of elementary particles, the speculations if quantum phenomena might have nevertheless something to do with consciousness never cheesed really. However, from the perspective of Sri Aurobindo, we might find what the underlying wrong assumption is. The indeterministic aspect inherent in quantum matter and the holistic aspect of entanglement make much more sense if we shift our perspective from the action of an individual human consciousness to a universal one. It is through the action of a cosmic mind that the world appears as differentiated unity, not only because of our individual mentality. It is not that of a human observer, but this universal consciousness that is at work, and which is the manifestation of a divine being which has plunged itself into a first layer of ignorance and duality, and that creates matter through a principle of division, departing from a manifold oneness and generating infinite variety by a sort of fiction of separate individual existence. In fact, we might interpret quantum entanglement and the the collapse of the wave function the other way around. Quantum entanglement is the original and almost constant present state of all matter, whereas its appearance as separate and divided particles is the instantaneous action of a dividing mind. But a mind with a capital letter, not the mind of a human being. I like to believe that it is this cosmic differentiation, individualization, and self-limitation, the exclusive concentration of a cosmic mind in itself, that causes the gazillions of wave function collapses that occur at every fraction of a second in the universe, whereby an undivided unity apparently ceases to exist, creating this illusion of substance and creating a divided existence where it cannot find there the unity of the spirit or the truth of the spiritual existence, as again Sri Aurobindo used to say. So let me read directly from the Life, some passages from the Life Divine. But mind, by its very nature, tends to know and sense substance of conscious being, not in its unity or totality, but by the principle of division. It sees it, as it were, in infinitesimal points which it associates together in order to arrive at a totality. And into these viewpoints and associations cosmic mind throws itself and dwells in them. Elsewhere, Sri Aurobindo adds, now it is true that the principle of division in matter can be only a creation of the divided mind, capital letter, which has precipitated itself into material existence. For that material existence has no self-being, is not the original phenomenon, but only a form created by an all-dividing life force which works out the conceptions of an all-dividing mind. This expression self-being attracted my attention a bit because it reminds me of the wave-particle duality, where one never sees particles as such. They always behave like waves unless there is an interaction with other particles. Before that interaction, this material and point-like existence we call particle and matter seems to have no self-being. It is just a probability wave that travels through space and time, something very abstract. At any rate, according to Sri Aurobindo, the principle of division is not proper to matter, but to mind. A mind with capital letter M. And that explains also quite well why in our culture, in science, reductionism was so successful. It is because on one side, this atomic existence is caused and inherent to the very same cosmic mind and has therefore a reality on its own. On the other side, it is naturally inherent also in the human mind, which is an individualization in a consciousness force center of the cosmic mind and finds itself naturally reductionistic, since it is its very nature from the beginning, already prior to the existence of the material universe and humans themselves. But humans reflect this cosmic mind, so to speak. So the two poles come together and explain naturally also the effectiveness of mathematics. Another topic which led to several philosophical debates, by the way, since it is the science of quantity, and quantity being the counting of separate and distinguishable objects, divided and distinguishable objects, that we abstractly represent with numbers. So, Sri Aurobindo again, matter, therefore, is the last stage known to us in the progress of pure substance towards a basis of cosmic relation in which the first word shall be not spirit but form, and form in its utmost possible development of concentration, resistance, durably gross image, mutual impenetrability, the culminating point of distinction, separation, and division. It is a culminating point of distinction, separation, and division. This is the intention and character of the material universe. It is the formula of accomplished divisibility. Matter is a creation of consciousness, therefore, in the sense that there is a universal mind preceded by a superconscient mind, the overmind, which by the instrumentality of a universal sense creates in itself the relation of form with form. Therefore, we arrive at this truth of matter that there is a conceptive self-extension of being which works itself out in the universe as substance or object of consciousness, and which cosmic mind and life in their creative action represent through atomic division and aggregation at the thing we call matter. What appears to me now here also quite suggestive is how all this might even relate to the concept of quantum vacuum. We saw that in quantum physics there is no such thing as empty space, even not when a volume of space is emptied of all the matter, radiation, and particles. According to quantum physics, also vacuum at a chilling absolute zero temperature must be conceived as a foam of quantum fluctuations, or stated more precisely, of quantum potentialities, where the so-called virtual particles pop in and out of existence for extremely brief time intervals, as far as it is allowed by the time-energy uncertainty principle. This idea that something appears and disappears just out of the blue, just out of nothing, is, well, quite hard to accept. And yet physicists were forced to accept it, since only by implementing this into their theoretical construction everything works out. And recall what we have said about the Casimir effect, the time-energy uncertainty, virtual particles, the Feynman diagrams, and so on. And as we shall see later, this is a fundamental basis with which the standard model of particle physics works. But if we accept Sri Aurobindo's point of view, we see how all this seemingly ghostly virtual reality of particles coming and going out of existence is a quite naturally working of a cosmic mind and consciousness that, with its extreme fragmentation of the infinite, particularizes itself in an ever-present self-concentration of itself everywhere in space and time, as a permanent succession of manifestations of the localized action of a universal consciousness in form of forces, energies, and movements coming and going, or else what we would call particles and their interactions. And as he says, it is an alternative rhythm of rest and movement succeeding each other in time, or else as an eternal self-concentration of force in immutable existence with a superficial play of movement, change, and formation, like the rising and falling of waves on the surface of the ocean. Which means also that there is no popping in and out of existence of particles at all. It is the activity of a cosmic mind, a universal consciousness that transforms itself from one state into another, but which to a superficial mental human observation, a human mind, would appear as an extremely fast coming into being, followed by an almost immediate disappearance into nothingness. Whereas in this supramental vision, all that appears as a sort of, so to speak, phase transition, not a creation or annihilation ex or into nihilo. Moreover, let us not forget what quantum physics is all about, namely quanta. As you know, since Planck introduced the idea of energy being quantized, we have this discreteness and fragmentation activity in the universe also at other levels. In quantum physics, energy, spin, angular momentum, mass, magnetic momentum are all quantized physical dynamic variables. That is, after all, why it is called quantum physics, quantum theory, or quantum mechanics. It is all about quanta. There is no, however, a priori explanation for all that. We only know that this is a fact and accept it as it is without questioning much, and suppose it to be a direct consequence of some no better specified pre-quantum level of existence. It is therefore tempting for me to have some sympathy to conjecture that it is a dividing cosmic mind in itself that leads to a divided and differentiated material universe in terms of particles, atoms, molecules, fragmented matter, reflecting this also in an action of separation and differentiation down to the level of quantization of all physical properties of matter, space, time, and forces. So I don't go further than that, since these are my own extrapolations to quantum physics, from quantum physics to metaphysics and conjectures you must not necessarily share. The point, however, I wanted to make, and the takeaway message I would like to furnish, is that we must seriously consider if modern science is the ultimate tool for acquiring knowledge about the physical world. It is quite natural to think that man is a transitional being, as Sri Aurobindo used to say. And it is almost certain that science, as it is nowadays at least, can't be the ultimate word about physical reality. Looking also further and see what those who were able to rise to higher states of consciousness can tell us, might be something worth to do, at least to get some inspiration and indication where science could direct itself.